between the shadows of reality and the fringe of our own fears lurks a world of monsters. Strange creatures and frightening phantoms who test the very boundaries of our science and superstition. It's a realm of mystery and legend, a place of fact and fear. This is Monstro Bizarro. On July 6, 1953, a group of nearly 60 men, including law officials and armed citizens, plunged into the swampy thickets surrounding Bladenboro, North Carolina, in search of a terrifying phantom beast. For more than a week, the elusive creature had been terrorizing the residents of this small mill town, stalking around homes, killing dogs, and approaching homeowners. Those who had gotten a glimpse of the shadowy animal described it as some kind of huge black cat with a long tail and sharp teeth. It appeared to be feline, yet its tracks were larger than any typical wildcat in the area, and perhaps even more monstrous with their long claw impressions, a characteristic not usually found in cat tracks. Whatever this thing was, feline, canine, or otherwise, it appeared to be hiding in the overgrown reaches of the nearby swamps, where it could emerge unseen at night to terrorize the surrounding community. It was sinister, silent, and very deadly. And its hapless canine victims were often discovered bloodless, as if the thing had drained them dry like a vampire. So far, the beast had not attacked a person, but officials feared that if the incidents continued, someone would surely be injured, or worse, killed. Regional newspapers at the time publicized the bizarre case on a daily basis, featuring headlines such as "Woman Eludes Bleeder Beast in Attack at Bladenboro." The publicity fueled fear and prompted the locals to take action. The posse, which included tracking dogs, prayed they would find the mysterious beast before its next victim. A phantom the newspapers dubbed the Beast of Bladenboro. Welcome to a new episode of Monstro Bizarro. I'm your shadowy host, Lyle Blackburn. On this episode, I will recount the bloody story of an alleged cryptid creature that has become known as the Beast of Bladenboro. This classic cryptid case, dating back to 1953, was well documented by newspapers, leaving a record of the beast's deadly behavior. It falls into a category of cryptids often referred to as phantom cats or phantom felines, though in this case it also creeps into the category of vampiric cryptids due to its gruesome habits. Either way, it's an intriguing story and a situation that kept the citizens of this North Carolina town in the grip of fear for weeks as they tried to figure out just what was stalking the swampy woods that surrounded them. The story begins on the night of December 31st, 1953, when something killed two dogs belonging to Johnny Vouse, a resident of the small town of Bladenboro. Around 10:30 p.m., Johnny's dogs began barking wildly out on the front porch, followed by the sound of fighting. When he went outside to investigate, Johnny was shocked by a gruesome sight. One of his dogs lay dead and mangled right there on the porch. Its lower jaw had been torn off, and there were blood smears and pools of blood everywhere, as well as a pool of what looked like saliva. He was not sure what had attacked the dog, but assumed it had come from the swampy woods that surrounded his rural home. Fortunately, Johnny's other dog had evaded the killer. It was cowering near the porch, but it was unharmed. Johnny and his father, who was also living in the home, wrapped the deceased pet in a blanket and planned to bury it in the morning. Johnny's dogs always stayed outside, and figuring that whatever had attacked the other dog had gotten its fill, he went back inside and eventually went to sleep. Around 1:30 a.m., Mr. Vouse was awakened by more noises and barking coming from the front porch. By the time he got outside, his other dog was nowhere in sight. He called to it, but it did not respond. Tragically, he would find it 3 days later in some nearby bushes. The remains were even more gruesome than the first dog's had been. The top of its head had been torn off, and its body was, quote, crushed and wet, like it had been in the thing's mouth. Johnny had no idea what had done this, but there was no doubt it had to be very big and certainly very dangerous. This, unfortunately, was only the beginning. The following night, New Year's Eve, Miss Woody Storm called police to report a disturbance around her home. She claimed that her neighbor's dogs began barking and whimpering just as the sun went down. When she went to see what was causing the ruckus, she saw a sleek, black, cat-like creature disappear into the woods. Bladenboro Police Chief Roy Fors eventually drove out to the Storm's farmhouse. When he arrived, Woody Storm led him to the bodies of 2 mutilated dogs. Mr. Storm described the disturbing sight to the newspaper. He said the dogs were literally eaten up. Word of the dog killings quickly circulated around town, causing pet owners to go on high alert. Even so, this did not stop the carnage. On the night of January 2nd, 1954, yet another dog suffered the same fate, this time belonging to a farmer by the name of Gary Callahan. 2 more dogs were found dead in Bladenboro on January 3rd. In this case, one of the dog's jawbones was smashed and its ear was gnawed off, while both dogs' tongues were, quote, chewed out. It was a horrible scene. At this point, Chief Fors was so concerned, he ordered an autopsy on one of the dogs in an attempt to identify what may have killed it. Fors reported that there wasn't more than 2 or 3 drops of blood in him, leading to speculation that whatever was doing the killings was literally drinking the blood of its victims. One of Johnny Vouse's dogs was found in a pool of blood, but many of the subsequent victims appeared to be bloodless when they were found. No one had seen the culprit in the act of killing the dogs, but more residents caught glimpses of an animal they believed might be responsible. A man named Malcolm Frank said he saw a shadowy creature cross the street. He said it was about 4.5 feet long, bushy, and resembling either a bear or a panther. On January 3rd, James Pittman heard an eerie noise outside his home. It sounded kind of like a baby crying. When he went outside to investigate, he saw some kind of large black animal moving through the bushes. He did not get a good enough look at it, however, so he could not say just what it was. The following evening, Lloyd Clemens was sitting with his wife in their living room when they heard their dogs begin to bark.
I glanced out the window and saw this thing. It had me plumb spellbound. It was walking around on all fours and was nearly 2 feet high with a long tail, about 14 inches long. The color of it was dark. It had a face like a cat, and only I ain't never seen a cat that big. It was walking around stealthily, sneaky, moving about trying to get to my dogs. I jumped from my shotgun and loaded it and went out to shoot, but it moved into the darkness right away and I couldn't find him again.
Rumors circulated that a goat was also found dead with its nose completely bitten off. A few hogs were also said to have fallen victim to a mysterious predator. At one residence, a doghouse door had been shredded to ribbons by what appeared to be claws or talons. If the citizens of Bladenboro hadn't been concerned before, they were now. It seemed that whatever this shadowy black creature was, it was not going away. The town of Bladenboro is located in the swampy coastal region of North Carolina, in the southern portion of the state within Bladen County. Established in the 1800s, it is a very small town by today's standards, and certainly so in 1954. The population at the time was less than 800. Bladenboro was originally a farming community, but later developed businesses in the turpentine, lumber, and cotton gin industries around the 1880s. The peaceful, pastoral landscape of Bladenboro is flanked by a number of swamps where primitive life flourishes amid briny waters and rugged woodlands. This includes Green Swamp and Red Hill Swamp to the southeast, and Big Swamp to the north, all likely haunts for whatever might have been wreaking havoc in Bladenboro. As the attacks continued, the newspapers echoed the gruesome details across the headlines. The story even went national by way of the newswire, bringing unexpected attention to the small town. Soon, carloads of self-proclaimed monster hunters began to pour into the area, ready to put an end to the unseen predator's reign of terror. According to a dispatch from the Charlotte Observer newspaper, hunting parties with a total of 500 men and around 50 dogs surrounded this terrorized mill village as a maddened, blood-sucking beast continued to roam at large. A group of fraternity boys from the University of North Carolina drove down from Chapel Hill to join the hunt. Armed with rifles, the students plunged into the swamplands, hoping for a shot at the beast. Others drove in from Wilmington, Wadesboro, Tabor City, Fayetteville, and all points in between, even from out of state. Some of them, such as S.W. Garrett of Wilmington, brought in tracking hounds. Garrett, whose 5 plot hounds were skilled in tracking wildcats, said his dogs came within 20 yards of what he believed was a panther. Yet, they still failed to corner the mystery beast. This sort of monster hunt is reminiscent of so many of these notorious cryptid cases, including the Boggy Creek Monster and the Bishopville Lizard Man, which I've covered in previous episodes. As in the other cases, this presented a huge problem beyond the creature itself, with so many trigger-happy hunters running amok. Somebody was likely to get hurt. It was becoming a problem for local law enforcement, who were not at all prepared for such a situation. And still, there was the creature. Local residents were obviously concerned for the safety of their pets, but thus far the beast had not threatened any persons. That would change on the night of January 5th, 1954. According to a news article with the dramatic title, vampire charges woman. A Miss C.E. Kinlaw of Bladenboro was rushed by a, quote, huge beast when she walked into her front yard to find out why her dogs were whimpering. The animal came from the neighboring yard, running down the unpaved street and up to her porch. Miss Kinlaw screamed and ran for the front door. Fortunately, the scream was enough to send the animal running away from the house. Mr. Kinlaw heard the commotion and rushed out the front door. The Kinlaws both watched in horror as the animal fled into the nearby swamp. They could not identify exactly what it was. It was not a bear, not a dog, perhaps a very large wildcat with black fur. Once the frightening beast was gone, the Kinlaws quickly called the police. When Chief Forres arrived at the scene, he discovered large tracks with claw impressions along the dirt road in front of their home. The tracks were described as being about half the size of a man's hand and resembling either a dog or a cat's print. Theories as to what the beast might be ranged from wildcat to wild dog, with most bets laid on it being a, quote, mad panther. The only problem is that feline prints don't typically register claw impressions, since cats have retractable claws. Not to mention, wildlife game authorities claimed there were no panthers, i.e. cougars, living in North Carolina at the time. The last verified sighting of a cougar was near the town of Highlands, over 300 miles away, in 1905. This was a conundrum since witnesses described the beast as being cat-like and resembling a black panther, yet these prints, at least, didn't seem like those of a felid. Whatever this thing was, feline, canine, or otherwise, it appeared to be hiding out in the overgrown reaches of the swamp where it could emerge unseen at night to terrorize. The Green Swamp, located just outside of Bladenboro, offers 15,000 acres of wild ecology where longleaf pine savanna forests and moccasin bogs create a unique habitat that is not only rugged, but home to a number of wild predators and even rare carnivorous plants. The most famous of these is the Dionea muscipula, or, as it's more commonly known, the Venus flytrap. The bog's wet, acidic soil does not supply enough nutrients for the typical array of swamp flora, so carnivorous plants do well because they are able to take nutrients from other sources, such as insects. The Venus flytrap can only grow naturally in a 100-mile area of southern North Carolina and northern South Carolina, so its existence has been threatened due to a lack of ideal habitat. The Green Swamp has become a key factor in the plant's survival to this day. It may have also been the home of the legendary beast. Concerned that its next victim might be a person, Chief Forres and Mayor Woodrow G. Fussell decided they should organize an official posse to hunt down the thing newspapers were now referring to as the vampire beast, bleeder beast, or Beast of Bladenboro. On January 6, 1954, Forres, along with a group of 50 to 60 men, comprised of deputies and armed citizens from Bladenboro and beyond, and 4 tracking dogs, charged into the swamp and the surrounding thickets in search of the animal. The posse looked for hours, combing every possible acre, but never laid eyes on the so-called beast. The only potential evidence they found were more of the large cat-like tracks. They actually found 2 different sizes of tracks, leading them to conclude that there may be 2 of the beasts. During the hunt, Chief Forres and another man heard something that made them think the beast had claimed yet another victim. They said that around 1:30 a.m., he and another man were standing at the edge of Bladenboro when they heard a dog cry out in pain. Flores said it sounded like the dog was being dragged into the dense swamp beyond the houses. Chief Flores and Mayor Fussell were not the only ones fearing a deadly attack. Many residents were afraid to leave their house after dark or to walk too close to the thickets at the edge of town. The creature could be lurking there, ready to drag them into the darkness, just as it had done with the dogs. Sue Browning, a Bladenboro native who still lives there, remembers the atmosphere at the time. She was in her teens when the beast hunts were in full force. "You could not have paid me to go outside at night," she told the Fayetteville Observer. "It was frightening. I lived out in the country. We were just hearing things about the beast around town. You were afraid to go out at night, afraid it would get us." The publicity had been good for the small town in some ways. Restaurants were filled with sightseers and hunters. Willis Nance, who operated a barbecue restaurant in Bladenboro at the time, said that hundreds of people came into his restaurant. He told the Fayetteville Observer, "It was good for business back then. We fed people from Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina who came to see the beast." At first, Mayor Fussell didn't seem to mind the tourism, and in fact promoted it. But the negative downside of armed hunters running around his town became a huge concern. At one point, he considered calling the governor of North Carolina to ask for assistance from the National Guard, but he decided against it. Locals, on the other hand, continued to scour the woods and bogs in search of the vampire beast. But no matter how hard they tried, it remained elusive. It was like a shadow emerging from the corners of the countryside, like a monster from the fringe. The association with vampirism is an interesting aspect and one that appears in other notable cryptid cases. Just like the Beast of Bladenboro, the infamous chupacabra is said to have drained its animal victims of blood. In 1995, during the initial wave of alleged chupacabra incidents in Puerto Rico, numerous livestock, such as goats and sheep, turned up dead in this manner. Wounds were often found on their necks and other parts of the body, presumably where a fanged creature had been feeding. This kind of behavior is unusual for large predators, since they typically kill an animal to consume the meat and organs, and are not known to simply drink the blood. Some predators, such as cougars, may practice what is known as surplus killing, where they will kill several animals in an attempt to acquire more food, but they don't usually kill 30 goats by drinking their blood. The wave of bizarre livestock killings in Puerto Rico was attributed to sightings of a strange creature that was dubbed chupacabra, which translates to goatsucker in Spanish. Witnesses, primarily a woman named Madeline Tolentino, claimed to have actually seen it. Tolentino described the thing as being 4 to 5 feet tall, covered in fine gray fur, walking on 2 legs with large red eyes and bright-colored spines down its back. Her sighting has generally been discredited, thought to have been influenced by the 1995 sci-fi movie Species. But the point here is that the chupacabra was also said to have vampire tendencies, and this wasn't even the first mention of a creature in Puerto Rico that did. 20 years earlier, in the spring of 1975, a rash of similar incidents had residents panicking in the suburb of Mocha, located in the northwestern portion of the island. Starting in February of that year, numerous cows, pigs, chickens, and other livestock started turning up dead by way of blood loss. An unseen predator had apparently descended on them in the dead of the night, leaving deep, claw-like marks on their bodies, puncture wounds in and around the neck, and, of course, a lack of blood. After several weeks of this, baffled authorities could only attribute the deaths to packs of wild dogs, which didn't seem very likely, but that was all they had to offer. It wasn't until March that a possible culprit was spotted. A woman named Maria Acevedo said a monstrously sized winged beast landed on top of her home and started screeching and flapping about. The thing was much larger than a normal bird, and instead of feathers, it was covered in a leathery-looking skin. In short, it looked like a prehistoric pterodactyl. A bird with a beak-like mouth, no matter how many teeth it may have, just doesn't seem like a likely candidate. But either way, it fueled more theories and panic around what was now being referred to as the Vampiro de Mocha, or the Mocha Vampire. The Mocha Vampire continued its rampage, killing more animals throughout March of '75. In one case, the thing attacked 17 animals in one night, killing 10 of them as a result of deep penetrating wounds, trauma, and massive blood loss. 5 days later, a dead pig was discovered by a farmer named Felix Badillo. Most of its blood was gone, and there was a hole in its head, giving the appearance of something powerful being violently thrust into the skull. One of its ears was even missing, having been cut away in an almost surgical manner. 2 days later, resident Juan Muniz was attacked by a huge bird-like animal that swooped down upon him. The thing forced Muniz to the ground, but he managed to escape. Once again, no one could say whether this thing was responsible for the livestock slayings, but it was a very bizarre coincidence. The reign of vampiric terror lasted into the early summer, then, at the end of June, suddenly stopped. The creature seemed to vanish as quickly as it had come, leaving more questions than answers. Though the city of Mocha still remembered its namesake monster, the legend of the Mocha Vampire faded, and by the time similar killings started up in 1995, the alleged beast was dubbed the Chupacabra. While physical descriptions of both the Chupacabra and the Mocha Vampire are much different than the phantom feline-type Beast of Bladenboro, there are many similarities, from the shadowy nature of the attacks to the supposed draining of blood and failure by authorities and armed hunters to apprehend it. The monstrous nature of the cases, even if the killings were the result of a known predator gone wild, naturally led to monstrous conclusions. Back in Bladenboro, the next suspected sighting of the alleged beast occurred on January 11th, when a large, dark-colored animal crossed the road in front of 2 vehicles. The witnesses, 6 in all, described it to Chief Flores as being at least 4 feet long and 2 feet high, with a long tail and a large head with runty-looking ears. Now, this does fit within the size range of a panther, but even today, the existence of so-called black panthers has never been proven.
Well, we were driving on a back road, approaching the town, when a huge animal darted into the road. It looked like a big cat or a dog with a body more than 4 feet long, covered in dark or black fur. It had a long tail and a large head with runty-looking ears on top. It was there for a few seconds and then ran into the woods on the other side of the road. It was really the most unexpected thing I've ever seen.
Following the sighting on January 11th, a local hunter named Luther Davis decided to try and capture the beast. To this end, he got a trap designed to catch large predators and set it up in the murky bog just off the road where it had been seen. Sure enough, when he checked the trap the next morning, it held a good-sized bobcat. The cat measured 30 inches long and weighed approximately 35 pounds, and it had a stumpy tail. Now, this was considerably smaller than what witnesses had described, the wrong color, and its tail was way too short. But it was good enough for Mayor Fussell to proclaim the beast had been slain, hoping this would calm the panic in his town and dissuade the invading monster hunters. When Luther Davis dispatched the poor bobcat and displayed its body on a pole downtown, the locals celebrated the victory. The underwhelming bobcat, however, was not the only suspect. An auto parts dealer from nearby Lumberton said he'd owned a large dog that was part hound and part German shepherd. The dog once patrolled his place of business, but would not stay in the enclosure, so he was forced to give it away to a boy who lived on the edge of Big Swamp. The man felt the dog could have been responsible for the rampage, although it seems unlikely a dog would have done what the Beast of Bladenboro did, nor does it fit the cat-like descriptions. The night after Davis captured the bobcat, a man named Bruce Souls was driving on the highway near Bladenboro when he struck and killed another wildcat. This animal, thought to have been an ocelot, stood about 2 feet high and weighed between 75 and 90 pounds. It had an 8-inch long tail. This animal was larger than the bobcat, but still not as large as the alleged beast. Not to mention it had tan white fur with spots, like a small leopard. Even so, this further reassured the people of Bladenboro that perhaps the predator was finally dead. But was it? That sound means it's time for some Monstro mail. Richard Church writes, "Hi Lyle, loving the podcast. I live in the area of Gaston County, North Carolina, about 30 minutes northwest of Charlotte. I was wondering if you've heard much about Sasquatch sightings in the foothills, Nobby being probably the most famous example. Thanks for the question, and it seems appropriate to answer it in this episode since I'm talking about another case from North Carolina. I'm familiar with Sasquatch sightings in your area, and specifically with legends of Nobby, which is a term locals have given to the Bigfoot-like creature or creatures sighted there. I covered this subject in my book Beyond Boggy Creek, which explores the history of ape-like creatures reported in the American South. Reports of Nobby first became public in 1978 when residents in Cleveland County claimed to see an upright, hairy creature lurking in the nearby foothills. The creature was dubbed Nobby because it had been seen on Carpenter's Knob, north of Kings Mountain. In the first report, a woman named Minnie Cook said she saw a huge, black, hairy creature prowling around her rural home on several occasions. It frightened her so much she started carrying a rifle when she ventured outside. Another woman, Sally White, also claimed to have seen the ape-like beast on the evening of January 16th, 1979. By the spring of '79, there were at least 16 reported sightings. The events resulted in a number of newspaper headlines and radio coverage. In one case, a radio station broadcast live from a campground at the base of Carpenter's Knob. This spawned, well, you guessed it, a wave of monster hunters who converged on the area and tried to flush out poor old Nobby. This, as usual, ended in total failure, probably because big groups of hunters tromping through the woods would be hard-pressed to even locate a deer. Bigfoot-like creatures have been reported in other parts of North Carolina, both before and after the famous Nobby incidents. The long history of Bigfoot sightings in southern states is not something that's been widely publicized until recent times, though it has been written about in some of John Green's books dating back to the 1970s. So perhaps old Nobby still lurks out there in your area, waiting for the next wave of sightings. North Carolina is a state full of mysteries, including the Brown Mountain Lights, so it's always fun to visit there. In fact, I was just there at an event where I did a presentation about, coincidentally, the Beast of Bladenboro. Bladenboro is up in arms about this mysterious thing called by some vampire. Should the varmint show itself in the daytime, its carcass wouldn't be worth the proverbial plug nickel. For all over Bladenboro, the blue steel of rifles and pistols is gleaming in the warm January sun. A farmer chopping wood for supper has his trusty rifle leaning carefully against the woodshed. And if he absolutely has to leave the protection of his home after dark, you will more than likely see a bulge under his coat that wasn't there before. When the sun goes down in Bladenboro, so do the shades and night latches. Dogs are securely locked in woodsheds, abandoned hen houses, and on the back porches of their master's house. Children are not allowed to stay outside after dark for fear of being seized by the blood-sucking varmint. For surely a beast that can carry the carcass of a howling dog off into the deep woods would have no trouble with a small youngster. These are the exact words written by Bill Shaw, the staff writer for the Fayette Observer, on January 8th, 1954. It sums up the sentiment of Bladenboro residents at the time when the vampire beast was inflicting its reign of terror on the town. In the weeks and months following the capture of the bobcat and the death of the poor ocelot, no more pets or livestock turned up dead, nor did anyone spot a dark, cat-like beast skulking around the town. The short burst of terror, which inspired an unprecedented amount of news coverage and frenzy, was apparently over just as fast as it had started, much like the case of the Mocha vampire, or Nobby, I might add. Some say the whole thing was hyped by Mayor Fussell himself. He had contacted newspapers with the story and even endorsed a showing of the 1949 action movie The Big Cat in their local theater. Known locally as Bob Fussell, he was something of a promotions master and perhaps came off like a carnival barker. Oddly enough, Bladenboro is the home of several notable sideshow performers, including Dick the Half-Man Hilburn, who, despite being born with no legs and only one arm, had a significantly remarkable career. Hilburn had traveled with the circus for some years, working as a tattoo artist and running a sideshow with his partner, Carl the Frog Boy Norwood. By 1953, Hilburn had returned to his beloved hometown of Bladenboro after growing tired of the constant travel. Hilburn, who was also a talented artist, set up shop as a sign maker. When the monster madness hit, Hilburn saw an opportunity. He produced license plates and other memorabilia with the vampire beast painted on it. He had no trouble selling these to the scores of hunters and sightseers who had descended on the town. Hilburn, Fussell, and others in the town may have capitalized on the publicity, but they certainly did not invent the beast or kill the animals. There was genuinely something living in the swampy woodlands surrounding Bladenboro that was terrorizing the town. Judging from the witness descriptions, the best candidate seems to be a black panther. Bobcats can have black fur, but as far as a panther with black fur, there's never been a proven case. Panthers are, of course, real animals, but in terms of the black variety of North American wildcat, they technically do not exist. The term black panther can be confusing since it doesn't necessarily refer to a distinct species of cat, but rather to any black melanistic specimens of any genus of large cat. For example, black panthers in Latin America are actually black jaguars, Panthera onca, and in Asia or Africa they are black leopards, Panthera pardus. In North America, however, the term black panther generally refers to cougars. The cougar, also known as a mountain lion, puma, or panther, is always tan or grayish in color, with a lighter underbelly. Rumored sightings of presumed black cougars have circulated in North America for at least a century, but as of yet, these shadowy felines remained unconfirmed and wholly classified as cryptids. So even if the Bladenboro beast were a cougar/panther, its description of being dark in color would classify it as a cryptid. But if it were a panther, it was one that exhibited an extreme appetite for killing. As I mentioned previously, wildcats have been known to practice what is called surplus killing, where they will kill several animals in an attempt to acquire more food, but it's not very typical. The creature stalking Bladenboro was undoubtedly on a rampage, if it was a panther. The idea that the infamous beast was a bobcat or an ocelot seems unlikely given the color and size of these animals. Ocelots are small and do not have black fur. Same for the bobcat, which was even smaller. There was a photo of the animal printed in the newspaper at the time. I've seen it, and the bobcat in this case was definitely not black or very big. The fact that the killing ceased after the deaths of the bobcat and the ocelot seem in favor that it was one of these wildcats. But still, that could be mere coincidence. The mysterious beast could have simply gotten its fill with all of those killings or moved on. I suppose it could have been a more exotic wildcat, like a melanistic jaguar or leopard. But the likelihood of an exotic pet or escaped circus animal like this roaming North Carolina at the time seems rather low. The idea that the beast was a dog definitely does not hold up in my opinion, since the behavior and the descriptions do not support it. The majority of the witnesses described a shadowy cat-like animal, so other than the inconclusive tracks that showed evidence of claws, everything seemed to point to a felid. Stranger things have occurred in North Carolina, though. In the winter of 2019, Brenda Hamilton, a 77-year-old teacher, was mauled and killed by an unidentified animal in Beaufort County, only 150 miles east of Bladenboro. According to police, she was walking her dogs at 5:30 a.m. when she was attacked by something vicious. Neighbors found her lying in a ditch next to the road, submerged up to her shoulders in water. EMS personnel who were called to the scene found that she had suffered catastrophic injuries to both arms, both legs, and to her head. A long trail of blood led from the road to the ditch where she was found. Theorizing that the perpetrator was a wild animal, local animal control officers collected DNA samples. Tests indicated the presence of canine DNA, but could not pinpoint exactly what kind of canine it might have been: dog, coyote, wolf, or otherwise. Local residents were skeptical, one literally blaming the attacks on a black panther, based on her own sighting of a large black cat in the area. While it may have truly been a dog or a pack of dogs, the similarity to the Bladenboro case is striking, and even with modern forensics, authorities still struggle to pinpoint the exact identity of the attacker. No matter what the Beast of Bladenboro was, panther, bobcat, ocelot, wolf, dog, or something even stranger, it also evaded a solid conclusion, leaving it to endure as a bloody, unsolved mystery. It's not the most dramatic of cryptid cases, but it's one that has achieved legendary status because it was unsolved, and because it was so well documented in the newspapers of the time, leaving us a record of the wild monster hunts. And because of the sensationalized vampire aspects, it's a story that's all the more intriguing to those who love a good monster story. In time, talk of the beast faded, and the people of Bladenboro gradually went back to the regularity of their lives. But those who lived on the edge of the surrounding swamp could not completely forget the thing that once prowled there, perhaps never really having ever been caught or killed. At the end of the day, when the sun began to set, they always glanced twice at the darkening shadows forming at its murky edge. Something could still be out there, watching, waiting, ready to strike again when the urge becomes too great. The swamp is the keeper of secrets, and among them, the true identity of the infamous Beast of Bladenboro. If you would like to find out more about my books and other projects, be sure to visit lyleblackburn.com. If you would like to support this podcast, click on the podcast link at my website. Thanks for your support.